Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending today's weekly DESCO seminar. Today's topic is function and requirements of ESD Smocks. I'm Jim McKeon, DESCO National Sales Manager. I've been with DESCO for 31 years, and with me today is Jeffrey Brake, DESCO Brand Manager. Jeffrey will be handling and organizing any of the questions that come our way. You can use a toolbar on your screen to ask questions, type them in. We'll have a break for questions in the middle of the presentation, and then we'll have another opportunity at the end of the presentation to answer any questions you may have. General overview of today's presentation, we're going to talk about the purpose of ESD Smocks, the types of ESD Smocks, and testing requirements of ESD Smocks. The main purpose of ESD Smocks, this is an actual statement from TR 20.20. Garments are intended to attenuate electrostatic fields that may be present on personnel clothing. Why is it necessary? Why do some companies feel smocks are necessary? Well, personnel clothing can generate a charge, and that charge can be induced onto static sensitive devices. Examples of clothing that can be a problem: polyester can be a problem, and obviously humidity and atmospheric conditions also play a role in how much charge some clothing can generate. If you look at the three pictures down below, you'll see a long sleeve smock, which is fine, a short sleeve smock, which is fine because the person's skin would likely be grounded, not generating a charge. And the third one is a person's sleeve from his or her shirt underneath, which would be a problem. And the problem is inducing of charges onto devices. In several of these webinars we've been setting up, we've talked about the 12-inch rule in a number of topics, and here's another case where anything charged more than 2,000 volts needs to be at least 12 inches from a device, and anything with 125 volts to 1,999 has to be at least an inch. And in applications such as, particularly the one I always think about is slide lines, where people are working at a slide line and their hands are resting on the slide line or they're leaning over it, and that's a classic situation where smocks can be a benefit. But pretty much any common workstation where personnel are leaned over and working on handling devices can be a situation where smocks can be a benefit. Additional purposes, companies buy smocks to make a uniform appearance within their company. Everyone's wearing the same clothing. It looks pretty sharp. Companies will buy smocks to identify visitors versus employees. Oftentimes, employees wear white. Some companies actually buy multiple colors of smocks and assign the color to employees by the department that they work in. A common purpose of a smock is to protect the clothing of company personnel. If a person is working in, a best example I can think of is conformal coating, and they're at risk for getting material, liquids, etc. on their personal clothing, giving them a smock protects their personal clothing and generally makes for a happier employee than an employee that has to go be buying their own clothes because they're getting ruined at work. TR 20.20 makes some suggestions for characteristics that you might want to evaluate when looking at samples. Comfort is the first one. When I think of that, I think of the weight of the smock, the length of the smock. Remember, you have to wear the smock all day long. Durability, what's the warranty on the smock? DESCO, for example, has a warranty of 2 years or 100 washings. is the application for the smock where there are sharp edges in an industrial type environment. Cleaning instructions are important. It's important that they be clear and followed. Excess heat can damage the smocks from an ESD standpoint, so that's an important factor. The function, well, the main function is usually to prevent charges from clothing from going onto static sensitive devices. So generally speaking, the higher the carbon content in a smock, the better it's going to attenuate those fields from clothing, and the longer it will be effective in doing that. Groundability, S20.20 2014, provides 3 categories of electrical resistance that correlate to performance of the smock, and that's an important to consider that when choosing a smock. Appearance, which is obviously colors, length of the smock. You want logos on the smock. A lot of companies put a patch or an embroidery or sublimation on the smock, person's name and company, or one or the other. And the smock should be identified as such. Generally speaking, all ESD products should be identified as such, and generally a label is what DESCO uses and what most smock companies use to identify them as an ESD smock. I mentioned the 3 categories. These electrical categories are listed in S20.20, and we're going to talk about each one of them in a little more detail now. Are there any questions to this point?
Jim, there's a question about short sleeve smocks. Is that something that's available, or is that something that's okay to use?
Sure. A short sleeve smock is okay as long as there's no clothing beneath the smock, as I showed in that earlier picture. So there are some short sleeves, like pre-made short sleeve smocks available. DESCO has what we call a convertible smock, which is a long sleeve smock that can be rolled up and cinched on the arm. It's important that the smock make a good solid contact with the person's skin. Gotcha. That's the number one important thing.
Right. What about wearing jackets or sweaters underneath smocks? Is that okay?
It is, again, as long as the smock is covering the jacket or sweater. Generally, our smocks, we like to make them a little blousy, I guess is the word, because they're lightweight, and if people want a little more warmth in the winter time, it's comfortable for them to use a sweater or something like that underneath, because again, they're wearing them all day, so it's important that they're comfortable.
Gotcha. Also, you mentioned the TR 2020 document.
Yes.
Where's that located, and how can people get a copy of that?
Sure. The TR 20.20 document is basically the handbook for putting together an ESD program. It gives a lot of details and explanations of various product elements. It's about it's over 200 pages and costs over $200, and that can be purchased off of the ESD Association website, esda.org.
Okay, thanks, Jim. That's it for questions right now. Please ask. There are some here we'll get to at the end, but if you have questions, please use the toolbar to ask those questions now. We'll get to them at the end of the presentation here. Thanks.
So 3 categories of ESD garments. One is static control garment, and that means that the resistance across the garment from sleeve to sleeve is 1 × 10⁹ to less than 1 × 10⁻11. For a garment to be able to be grounded, and they're grounded generally by having contact with the skin of a grounded person, the resistance of the garment needs to be less than 1 × 10⁹. So a static control garment in this resistance range would probably be considered low charging, and the possibility exists with a smock of this range to actually have the smock generate a charge itself. Just a quick note, Desco does not manufacture smocks in this garment category. The second is a groundable static control garment, and that means that across the breadth of the garment, sleeve to sleeve, the resistance is less than 1 × 10⁹. And that means that the garment itself will be grounded and not generate a charge when it comes in contact with the skin of a person that's grounded. So in the bottom left picture, that person's wearing a wrist strap, so they're grounded. The smock is wrapped tightly around at their elbow, arm area. So that means that because it's making a good contact with a grounded person, that the smock will also be grounded and not generate a charge. In the middle picture, same thing, except that person is wearing foot grounders and standing on an ESD floor mat. And on the right, that's a person wearing a smock with knit cuffs. So if that person wears a standard wrist strap in a standard form, band and cord, and those cuffs are making contact with the skin, then that garment is also grounded and will not generate a charge itself. The third category is a groundable static control garment system. So a groundable static control garment system, if it is going to be used as part of the ground path of the person, needs to have a resistance of less than 3.5 × 10⁷. That resistance range is notable in that it's the same resistance range as a wrist strap. So a groundable static control garment system can be used in a hands-free application, which means that the coil cord wrist strap is connected to the smock, not to a band on the person's wrists. So there's a picture of that in the middle of a person doing it, using it that way. This is from one of our technical bulletins. This smock, the knit cuff acts as a wristband. There's a conductive strip that goes from the knit cuff up the sleeve and down to the snap. And the person can therefore work hands-free without having the cord going across their work. That's the benefit of a static control garment system. General testing of ESD garments in TR 53, which is the compliance verification standard. This diagram is there, and it's basically a point-to-point test, sleeve to sleeve. And if you were on the webinar of a couple weeks ago when we talked about mobile carts, we talked about doing one test, and then if that test passes, then you're done. But if it doesn't, then you've got to break down the system and troubleshoot to find where the problem is. And it's a very similar process with smocks. So this point-to-point system is done with both static control garments and groundable static control garments, as well as a static control garment system. The static control garment system has an additional test. And that test is that you need, if you're using it for hands-free, hip to cuff, you've got to do a test that shows that the resistance of the person, the garment, and the cord is less than 3.5 × 10⁷. In this drawing, there's a picture of a person holding a wand connected to a resistance tester, and they are looking to see that the resistance is less than 3.5 × 10⁷. A much more common way of testing is to test at a standard wrist strap tester. Plug your wrist strap into the tester. You're wearing the smock as you would be wearing it while you're using it, and the tester will be set at 3.5 times 10 to the 7th, then you're looking to pass. Let's say that you, after doing the sleeve to sleeve test, your garment is out of spec. You think you have a groundable static control garment, and which needs to be less than 10 to the 9th, but it's not. So there are basically two elements of the troubleshooting. The first one is that we're going to check each of the 4 smock panels point to point. And it's important to note that the smock is made of 4 panels, the left sleeve, the left breast, the right sleeve, and the right breast. And the reason that we test across sleeve to sleeve is that we want to know that the smock is connected all the way across. Because if one of the panels is not electrically connected, then it can charge. It will be a floating conductor, and it can charge and cause problems. So that's why the initial test is point to point. So you're doing, again, a point-to-point test on each of the 4 panel elements of the smock. And you're looking to see if it's a material problem. Generally, in my personal experience, it's not a material problem. It's a panel-to-panel problem with the stitching between panels. So the next test that you would do is put one weight on the sleeve and the other weight just on the other side of the stitching on the breast. And you'll do that left and right, and you'll do that across left breast and right breast. And if you have a knit cuff on your smock, then you also need to put one weight on the knit cuff and one weight 2 or 3 inches up from there on the sleeve. And in all of those cases, the thing that we're really looking for is the integrity of the stitching between the panels. You know, not every, like anything else, not everything is made the same way with the same quality, with the same care. And when we find smocks that are having a problem, even though the material is good, it's generally in the stitching portion of the smock, that either it's not stitched properly, they're not using a conductive thread. We see it a lot in clean room type smocks, but that's really what you need to do, is first test point to point each panel, and then test point to point across the stitching of each panel and the sleeve. We're sort of wrapping up some other considerations when you're purchasing smocks. The more conductive material, the better. And the more, that's a legitimate, accurate statement for 2 reasons. The more conductive material in the smock, the better it will attenuate charges from clothing, and also the longer it will attenuate charges from clothing. I mentioned that generally smocks have a warranty that involves washing, and it's washing that can really beat up a smock and cause a deterioration of the conductive fibers. So the more conductive fibers you have on a percentage, the longer it's going to take to break down the fibers that are in the smock. So it's going to last longer. Style of the smock, generally there are 2 styles, jacket and lab coat. Another style factors are cuffs, open cuffs or knit cuffs, and colors. There's also pink. I don't know why we don't have pink here, but those are the 8 basic colors that Desco offers, and they're all pretty common. I would say the most common is blue, with white for visitors. Laundering instructions are very important. Speaking just for Desco, we have very detailed washing instructions on the technical bulletin for the smocks, and most smock manufacturers, I'm sure, do. It's some of the key elements of that are the type of detergent that you use, liquid's better, washing in cooler warm water, you know, tumble dry on low heat or hang. You don't want to expose, if necessary or if possible, don't expose the smock to heavy industrial dryers that use high temperature, because that can affect the general quality of the smock and specifically break down the conductive fibers. Do you want, markings on the smock? Company names are common. Company names and employee first or last name are common, and common methods for doing that are embroidery, patches, or sublimation. Just for Desco's standpoint, if you wanted to request and get a sample of any of our smocks on any of our web pages, there's a request to sample tab that you can hit and put in your information. Be happy to send you a smock. Questions?
Yeah, we have a number actually. First question, can you talk a little bit more about how often that you need to verify that the smock is working correctly? We had a few people kind of
Sure.
ask basically how
Sure.
often.
Well, in general, the ESD standards don't make a requirement. And the general guideline is to test any of your ESD products, mats, flooring, based on maybe the importance of the ESD program to the product. If you're making a high reliability product, products that protect our troops, avionics, medical instrumentation, you might want to check things more often than if you're making something that's not quite as high reliability. So there's really no requirement. A suggestion would be to test a percentage of smocks at the same frequency that you test table mats. That way it's part of the preventive maintenance or part of the testing program. I would say, again, on a personal observation, smocks don't get tested nearly as thoroughly as table mats and flooring and things like that. But it's certainly a good idea to test smocks, a percentage of smocks on some kind of a regular basis that matches the rest of your ESD program. And visitor smocks are probably going to last longer, so you should segregate the testing based on how the smocks are used and when the lots came in. Some companies use laundry services, and they'll require the laundry service to purchase a surface resistance tester and make testing of smocks part of their process before they ship the clean smocks back to the customer.
Gotcha. Similar type of question. How long should a good quality smock last? Okay,
so largely that depends on the percentage of carbon fibers. From an electrical standpoint, I would say that a smock with 9+ should certainly last 4 or 5 years. Speaking just for Desco, we have on our website an independent test where an independent laboratory service washed the smocks 100 times and did tests, and the results, the resistance was basically the same as when they were brand new. So it's very rare for us that we have smocks that wear out electrically. Usually they get dirty, they get ripped, they get lost, a little bit like heel grounders and wrist straps, right? They kind of wear out before they, physically before they wear out. So certainly multiple years you should be able to expect if they're taken care of properly.
Part of the reason for having smocks is to protect the operator's clothing. So the smock is going to take some of the brunt of that, right? They're going to get dirty, they're going to get torn, they're going to Right. That's that part of the, but the material itself, well, the material we use is going to remain relatively intact for a very long period of time, right?
Correct.
Gotcha.
It's a permanent product. It's not an additive. It's definitely
Yeah,
should last for many years.
right. There's also there's also a question about some smocks on the market. I don't know if Descos do, but have a snap in sort of the armpit stitching. I think that's used for the electrical to electrically bond the panels, right? Probably reinforces the stitching to some degree. I know I've seen it.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what it is. Are you talking about a place to hold a wrist strap for a different
No,
application?
on the inside, like under the armpit.
Okay, I've never
It's
seen
kind of
that.
where all the panels come together. I know I've seen it. I believe it's to just electrically bond the panels, like I said, and to reinforce the stitching, kind of like the way rivets on Levi's work or something. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what it is.
Okay.
People are asking what the meter that you use to test a smock is. Can you? It's
That would be a surface resistance tester with 2 5-pound weights. It's like shown there. I'll go back some slides.
I see
Like
it there. Yeah.
this kind of a tester.
Yeah, I believe that's what they're asking for.
Test kit with 2 5-pound weights.
Yep.
TR53, is available at no charge off the ESD Association website. I'll mention that there's another test in there that I've actually never seen anybody do, and that's what they call the hanging test. And it involves hanging the smock by sleeves and testing that way. I didn't even mention it here because I've never seen anybody do it. This is
We
the
actually Greg did it last week when we did the R meter. I don't know if you remember, but when Greg did the R meter demonstration last week on the webinar, we had one here that we did it. We
Okay.
made up some clips. The hard part is to make up the clips that go with them because they're hard to find. So you kind of have to make them yourself.
Yeah.
But most people just lay it out on a. Actually, that was a question too. You might have said it. You want to lay it out on the
Insulative.
insulative surface, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that definitely should have been part of the presentation on testing. Where
Okay.
were you on that one, Jeffrey?
I'm sorry. My
Seriously, yes, definitely on an insulative material. Oftentimes when we're doing ESD surveys, we test a few smocks. We end up inevitably going into the cafeteria or someone's office to test because that's the place.
Yeah, exactly. There's also a question here. When you're testing a smock with cuffs, you should probably test the inside of the. Probably test the inside of the cuff. I know on Desco's cuffs that the conductive fibers are all the way around them. I'm not sure what other manufacturers in the industry might use, but I know on Desco's they're all the way around. So that's why the pictures we used were on the outside, I think. Or does that sound correct?
Yeah, the pictures, the diagrams in TR53 show on the outside basically, and I don't believe that's part of the description of how to test, but I would agree that to be short, it wouldn't be a bad idea to do that, to test the inside of the cuffs.
All right. Let's see, any other things that we can get to today? There might, some of these questions I would be happy, we'll probably follow up with you to follow up with these people, with the people who ask these questions with more information. One smock is asked, or one question is asked is where are Desco smocks made?
Desco smocks are made in our Miami, Florida facility. It's a Desco owned facility, and we have 35 employees there making smocks and other things that we stitch.
Right.
And anyone who's down that way is always welcome for a tour.
Also a question, can they get samples of smocks with embroidery or patches, yeah, we will definitely do that. Just need to get a hold of, make contact with a customer service person at Desco or Jim. Jim, can you put up your information? I think it's the
Sure,
next slide.
sure.
So,
Yeah,
and
actually, as part of purchasing a smock with a logo, we require that we get the artwork and that the customer signs off on the artwork on the smock as part of that. So we can get some samples of what other people have done or get your own made up.
let's see if we got everything. Thank you. I think that's it for what we can really get to here. I think we've answered most questions. One more question about using smocks in clean room. What's the protocol for that?
So generally speaking, our smocks in our general electronics manufacturing category are not used in clean rooms, depending on the clean room classification, because it's a fabric and it can have particulate come off it. Generally speaking, clean room smocks are very smooth and shiny. There's nothing that can come off. But I will also say that when I talked about common opportunities for panel-to-panel issues, for some reason, those are the kind of smocks where we see it. So we always say we don't test our smocks to clean room compatibility, but we're always happy to provide a sample for any customer to do their own testing.
Gotcha. All right, I think that's good for now. If we didn't answer your question, we will get back to you in a follow-up email. And if you have further questions, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to discuss further what you need. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thanks to everybody. Take care.
Have a good one.
Bye.